Hello, friends, and welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies, a podcast that's listening to the songs of Disney movies past and present. I'm Josh Spiegel.
And I'm Scott Renshaw. Thanks for joining us on this comprehensive and encyclopedic compendium of all things Disney music. Now playing, from 1991, Beauty and the Beast.
Before we get into our discussion, thank you so much for listening. No matter how you're checking us out, we hope you like what you're hearing. And if you are, we'd appreciate it if you could rate and review Mousterpiece Melodies on iTunes, Spotify, and whatever app you might be using to listen to us.
That's right. Let everyone know how much you love the show and tell your friends to do the same. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw and read my film criticism at cityweekly.net.
You can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece, where if you aren't, you really should be voting in my daily Walt Disney animation. It's the World Cup of Walt Disney Animation Studios songs. Just as the World Cup is winding down in real life, we have the Disney Songs World Cup, which is nowhere close to the quarterfinals or whatever they're calling it right now. But we've had some close votes, so if you're not already there, please make sure to check out my Blue Sky account. And you can also email me at masterpiececinema@gmail.com with any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share. Right now that all the housekeeping is out of the way, let's get into our discussion of the songs of Beauty and the Beast. And to do that, we are thrilled to bring into the show a very special guest. He is a freelance entertainment journalist. You can find him at outlets like IGN and Fangoria. He also co-hosts the We Enjoy podcast. Eric Goldman, welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm very excited to talk about this film.
I know. We are very excited to talk about the original. Please know, we're going to acknowledge the fact that there is a remake of Beauty and the Beast. It's very fitting to do so because we happen to be having this discussion on July 10th, the day of the release of Disney's latest remake, Moana. And I believe, unless I'm about to be proven wrong, I'm the only one of the three of us who has yet to see new Moana. I'm guessing you both have. Am I right?
Yes.
As of yesterday, the answer is yes.
Okay. Well, maybe at some point I will. We have yet to talk about Moana and the songs of Moana on this show. Maybe when we do that, I guess I'll have to by that point. But, I get this, here. All I'll say, I've heard a lot of people comparing this one to Psycho, the Gus Van Sant remake. And in case anybody's out there wondering, that is not a flattering comparison, in my opinion. So, yeah. But we're talking about the original Beauty and the Beast today. And this is, of course, the 1991 classic directed by Gary Truesdale and Kirk Wise, featuring the voices of Paige O'Hara, Robbie Benson, Richard White, Jerry Orbach, and the incomparable Angela Lansbury, among many others. It is the Americanized adaptation of the famous French fairy tale about a beautiful young maiden who, for various reasons, finds herself under the control of a hideous beast who lives in a mysterious far-off castle with a handful or two of servants who have been enchanted. And this film features songs by composer Alan Menken and the late songwriter Howard Ashman. This is a huge piece of Disney's legacy, as we're going to get into, especially because of the songs. Now, the movie is going to be celebrating its 35th anniversary in a few months. It was released in November of 1991. I know that I was 7 years old when that movie came out. I believe I am the youngest of the three of us, and yet me saying the phrase Beauty and the Beast turns 35 this year makes me feel very, very old right now. But before we get into our track-by-track discussion, Eric, a question for you first, then to Scott, then I'll answer it. Do you have any recollection of the first time you saw Beauty and the Beast? Did you see it in theaters? Was it an immediate hit for you? What was your initial reaction for the film?
Yeah, so I do have recollection, and I did see it in the theater, and it's kind of a braggy way to say it, because I saw this movie at the El Capitan Theater when I think it was the only theater playing it in America. Maybe there was one in New York. I did just find the ad in the LA Times saying the exclusive showing El Capitan Theater to make sure I was remembering that correctly. Yeah, I saw this opening night at the El Capitan, which just reopened a few months before when The Rocketeer came out. And they did the first version of what's become kind of a staple of a stage show at the beginning. I don't quite remember the details. I just remember people singing and dancing, that stuff was happening, and that the movie went over extremely well. I remember that there was a lot of excitement because of Little Mermaid, and that this, sold out audience that were, getting to see it, obviously under very special circumstances. We were very, very into this movie, and so I've loved it ever since.
So I believe we talked about this back on the old show in like around the time that the remake was coming out, maybe even, I don't know. But this was one that, I was already a big boy. I was already quite a big boy, and so I probably shared this anecdote the time when we covered this back on the old show, which was my roommate at the time, who was a theater director and very big musical theater fan, and I was not writing yet, I was not covering it, but I knew that he was going to go see it opening night with his then partner, and that he came back, and basically because we were all wondering what to expect in the wake of Little Mermaid and how much that had been such a big deal, and he said, and I remember this very specifically, the quote is, he walked in and said, "Oh, this is not Ariel, because the first song is, she's smart, she reads books, she's not Ariel." Pretty much only in those terms. So that gave me a lot of enthusiasm, and so when I actually saw it pretty much just a couple of days later, and yes, I fell immediately in love with it, and it remains probably not just the best of the Renaissance era for me, but it's my favorite Disney animated feature, period.
Yeah, I mean, it's between this or Pinocchio, or maybe Fantasia for me, but certainly among the Disney animated films that were released in my lifetime, this would have to be number one. We've talked about The Little Mermaid a number of times. We talked about it on the old show. We talked about it in, I believe, the first season of this podcast. Scott, I forget. Mm-hmm. Was that Louis Peitzman as our guest in that one? I know we talked about Aladdin with Aisha Harris.
Oh, gosh, I lose track of who's...
I can tell you guys, you didn't have a guest for that one because I listened to it.
Well, kudos to you, Eric. I have to remind it's no
did
offense.
Their homework.
Yes, exactly. But the point is, I knew I was right that we discussed it on this show. Look at me, halfway right. Point being, we've talked about a lot of the crucial Renaissance era films, but this is, I know that if we were to look at box office, the answer is The Lion King, because The Lion King was a mammoth hit beyond compare. But as I was rewatching the film for this episode, I was reminding myself that in many ways, it's Beauty and the Beast that is the real linchpin of the Disney Renaissance. It's as if this is the movie that proved The Little Mermaid wasn't a fluke, because if you're out there listening, I'm sure all three of us know this, but if you're out there listening, you might forget that in between The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, you also get The Rescuers Down Under, which is notable because it is the first Disney sequel released in theaters, but also doesn't have any songs, very different from every other Renaissance era film in pretty much every way. This is the one that brings back Menken and Ashman, of course, in full for the last time, although Howard Ashman did write a number of songs for Aladdin, as we discussed in that episode. He, of course, very tragically passed away due to complications from AIDS in March of 1991, meaning he never got a chance to see this movie in full or even in part, which is one of so many heartbreaking details about the loss of Howard Ashman. We don't need to go into that in full, but answering my own initial question, I saw this movie in theaters at age 7. I was a little boy who wanted to be a big boy, which, by the way, in case you're also a fan of You Talking You Two to Me, not the only You Talking You Two to Me reference I'm going to be making today. Wait till you guys get to the awards section. I finally get to do something I've done on this show that will make everybody who doesn't know that podcast that I'm referencing, they'll be very confused, but I'm warning you in advance. My point is, I saw this at age 7, and I know I believe we talked when we discussed Aladdin. I believe that there was a sneak preview for Aladdin. Eric, you're talking about and I agree, it is very, very impressive. According to Wikipedia, you are right. El Capitan was the only place playing Beauty and the Beast for the first 9 days of its release. November 13th, 1991 is when it premiered. It expanded wide on November 22nd. I think the following year, Aladdin got a nationwide sneak preview. I would have seen this opening weekend. And, you know, it's the kind of thing that every filmmaker talks about, where you want to transport an audience. You want to make them forget that they're coming from their house or from work or from wherever to see this story. You are completely swept up in the movie. And I mean, I've seen this film countless times. It had been a few years since I rewatched it in full. I rewatched it again this past week. And, you know, if anybody pays enough attention to me on Blue Sky, you probably could guess exactly when I was rewatching it, because I, of course, did what I always do. I turned it into grousing via threads, via like a tweet post thread of thinking about this movie in relationship to the remakes. Again, this is coming out. This discussion, coincidentally, is the same time as Moana, which I know is not the last remake Disney is doing. They're already working on a Tangled remake. I assume at some point we're going to get a Frozen remake, because how could you not? But, you know, even thinking about this in light of the 2017 film, which, if you did listen to our Aladdin episode, anybody out there, you know that I made the grievous error of rewatching the remake of Aladdin to talk about it in our discussion, only to realize that neither Scott nor Aisha Harris had rewatched it either. And I thought, wait a second, why am I putting myself through this? And I know that I saw the remake in theaters with my wife. I just got so angry at it, partly because it was so many great, talented people in service of such a creatively defunct idea. This movie, though, is so wonderful, and that's what makes the remake so frustrating. That's the last I'll say of it for now. What makes this movie, I think, so special, especially compared to Little Mermaid, is exactly, Scott, what you and your roommate were talking about at the time. The idea that Belle is almost instantly presented as a different kind of Disney heroine, and maybe not in the kind of way that you see in postmodern movies like Frozen or Tangled, where it's like she's not going to marry a man she just met. She's going to fall in love with a guy she met 3 days ago. That's so much more daring and bold. Whereas, you know, in this movie, Belle she's intelligent. She is much more independent than Ariel was in The Little Mermaid. And crucially, unlike even in The Little Mermaid, this is a romance where both halves of the romance feel like they are main characters. We've talked about it so many times in other episodes. Many of the princes in previous Disney films, and I would include Prince Eric in this, they're kind of nothing. They're just guys, like literally Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The prince barely has an animated face. They've come a long way since then. But the Beast is such a vital character, so that the songs, of course, help build them as characters, but the rest of it does as well. And in terms of the songs, it becomes very clear pretty much out the gate that this is going to be a little different than The Little Mermaid, even if there are going to be some songs that might fit into the styles that we have talked about in previous episodes. There's definitely a couple of showstoppers here. There's a quintessential villain song, but our opening song is the one that really establishes something a little bit different. Now, to be fair, the movie, I always manage to forget, the movie opens before that opening song. We get that very intense prologue, narrated by David Ogden Stiers, who, of course, is also the voice of Cogsworth, but, you know, very talented actor who shows he's got a very different voice when he wants to use it. And we get the sense of how the prince was cursed by this enchantress. I do want to call out, I think it was in the first time I discussed Beauty and the Beast on the old show, Scott, before you were there. I want to say it was with our guest, Anthony Bresnikan, who was at Entertainment Weekly at the time, who pointed out, and I've never been able to forget this, and I never thought about it before he mentioned it. It's like, if you want to nitpick this movie, you can. To wit, how old is the prince when he gets cursed? And where are his parents?
11.
He's 11. Where are his parents, Scott? Why is he by himself in that castle?
and why should he be so picked upon that he was like, ooh, she's ugly? It's like, yeah, what 11-year-old isn't going to see an ugly woman and go, ooh, you're ugly?
Well, and to that point, I ever since he mentioned it, I think to myself, you know, I think the enchantress maybe course corrected a little too much. Yep, that 11-year-old's a jerk, so I'm going to turn him into a beast for 10 years at least. Okay, that's a little much.
I argue that she's like, and I was thinking the same thing when I'm watching this. I was like, man, is she like one of the greatest villains in Disney history? Mostly because of the staff. because the servants, what did they do? The servants, their children, their pets are all going to be under this body horror curse that could be forever if he's not done in time. That is cruel.
Yes.
I guess I'm also wondering if they were frozen in time at the time they were transformed, or if somehow Mrs. Potts had never mind. No, I don't want to know.
Well, wait a second. I must rewind this. Scott, maybe I'm forgetting how do we know he's 11? Where is that established? In what lore or canon?
Because it says in the song "Be Our Guest," 10 years we've been.
Yes. Yes. I was going to say, I have an 11-year-old at home, and he's a pretty well-behaved kid. And also, I don't think he'd get away with saying much better than what the prince says here. Anyway, I want to be very clear. I could nitpick parts of this movie. I don't care about those nitpicks. I can point them out, but this movie is perfect, so it doesn't matter. I do want to be very clear. I do love this film. So, The Prince is Cursed. The narrator establishes the core conflict right before the title, which is, who could ever learn to love a beast? We get the title, and then we open on the poor provincial town where our heroine, voiced by Paige O'Hara, lives with her father, the kooky inventor Maurice, and we get this brilliant, complex opening number that shares her name, and that name, of course, is Belle. Now, by coincidence, I was driving to San Diego on a family trip a week ago, and I had put on in the car Into the Woods, the Stephen Sondheim musical, the original Broadway cast recording, and I was re-listening to the prologue, which is, if you haven't heard that show, or if you only know the movie, God forbid. The first 12 minutes is this very extensive prologue that establishes multiple characters and all these different conflicts, and Belle is not quite that intense and dexterous. It's about a 6-minute number. Really, it's only there to establish the conflict between Belle and Gaston, but more importantly, Belle and the town in which she lives. She calls it a poor provincial town, and that may seem a little snobbish, but also the movie kind of proves that she's right to be disdainful of the people in the town who very quickly turn into a mob, as we'll discuss later. It gives us the sense of why Gaston thinks, well, you're the prettiest girl in town. I'm the most handsome man in town. We should be married. You should have all of my children and my dogs. And what else would there be for you to do in life? And again, this number is so mature for what it's trying to do. It certainly is one of the most, it's pushing Disney songwriting and Disney storytelling in a way that I really don't think Disney had done before this. It is, again, such a perfect piece of music. I'm going to use that word a lot today in this discussion. Fair warning. What did the two of you think of at least the initial version of Belle? We'll talk about the reprise in a minute.
I think, what really impresses me, and, because I was honed in this time, knowing we were going to be talking about this, that opening song, it really feels like the opening of a Broadway show in a different way than I think Disney had been doing, including Little Mermaid, because it is such a, sweeping, here's the town, here's supporting characters, here's these people that are going to pop up later, and because it's not, it's called Belle. It's about Belle, but it's not just about Belle. And I think that, Menken and Ashman's sort of stage background really kind of shines through there in a way that and that's not the only time in the movie. I'm going to repeat that later. But I think that this number especially does give you it's no surprise to me that this became the first Disney Broadway show, not just because, it was a beloved movie, but also because I think it lends itself by its structure and by its songs and by this opening song in a way that is really inviting on that level.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really fascinating to me about it is, we've talked many times now about sort of that Howard Ashman, the model for the musicals, having the I Want song, having the showstopper, all of these things. And whereas the efficiency, and we're all going to say this, here's a word I'll be using more than one time, is that where you basically have the stage setter. That is another typical song, the scene setter song, which was Fathoms Below in Little Mermaid. But he managed to figure out a way to combine the scene setting song with the I Want song in a way that doesn't harm either one of them, and in fact makes both of them better, because you kind of need to know the scene. You need to know what kind of a town it is in order for the I Want to make sense. And it's a wonderfully written song, but it's this, I think that this is an astonishingly good script. It is just so efficient, and that includes the way the songs are used. Everything is where it needs to be, when it needs to be. And I think the fact that there was a way to set the scene and still fit the I Want song in there in a way that didn't shortchange either one is just evidence of how much is right about this movie and the way it's constructed.
Yeah, this movie is a magic trick in so many ways, I feel like, because, again, we talked about it when we discussed Aladdin. After the success of Beauty and the Beast, Howard Ashman wanted to do Aladdin. That was his pet project, which has always blown my mind, because not only did this come first, but this is the one that becomes this massively, correctly beloved film. And it is also, I will acknowledge, you mentioned the script, Scott. Although Howard Ashman was listed as a screenwriter on Little Mermaid, that is not the case here. Linda Wolverton is the credited screenwriter here. I feel like I don't have any quotes in front of me. I feel like when the remake came out, there was a lot of like Linda Wolverton was like, well, I really am a big part of the reason why that movie works so well. And it's like, maybe, but kind of think that those songs are a big part. But I also want to clarify that people may or may not recall that initially Beauty and the Beast was going to look and sound very, very different. Disney had worked on a version of this for a long time. They pushed to make the movie as Who Framed Roger Rabbit was wrapping up, and it was originally going to be directed by the English animation director Richard Purdom. It was also, crucially, going to be a non-musical. And then Jeffrey Katzenberg in 1989 saw the initial reels, didn't like it at all. Eventually, Richard Purdom resigned. John Musker and Ron Clements were approached, but they were understandably pretty exhausted after doing The Little Mermaid. And then Katzenberg asked Ashman and Menken to work on Beauty and the Beast. And they did so at a time when, even though I believe Howard Ashman had let Alan Menken know that he had been diagnosed with AIDS and he was beginning to suffer ill health because of that. I believe if I have my Disney history right, that happened after or during the Little Mermaid Academy Awards push, so early 1990. And when you think about the fact that the next year and a half is when this movie comes to fruition the way that we know it, and that Howard Ashman passed away 7-8 months before this film came out, but was able to get all this across, it's truly remarkable. Especially when you just think about how crucial these songs are to the overall story. So again, Belle, the first version of Belle, because there are two different versions, and unlike the case with another song here that gets reprised, the second version is even more crucially the I Want version of the song. So we get to meet Belle. We see the village that some people think, Belle, she's a kook, but she's okay. A lot of people like Gaston and his friend LeFou think that Maurice is a real weirdo. And eventually, even before we get the reprise, Maurice goes off to a local fair to present his latest invention. I do just want to call out, I love the scene. I have always loved the scene where Maurice goes off, gets lost in the forest, eventually becomes the first person to find the Beast's castle, and meets Lumiere, the candlestick, voiced by Jerry Orbach, Cogsworth, the grandfather clock, voiced by David Ogden Stiers, Mrs. Potts, voiced by Angela Lansbury, and so on and so on. Before Belle is even aware of this prince or this castle, which I will acknowledge seem awfully close to the village for nobody to be aware of it. Doesn't matter, but I will point that it's not a very long walk. But I love that sequence partially because you don't really get where it's going immediately, and then it turns into a miniature horror movie that he is, Maurice is unable to escape. He's being chased by these wolves. He gets to the castle. He meets these characters out of a body horror movie, as you said earlier, Eric. Maurice's horse, Philippe, escapes, returns to Belle. She realizes something is up. But before she's able to go to the castle, Belle is she is imposed upon. I think about the line from Arrested Development. It's an intervention. I'd love to call it an imposition. And it is an imposition when the entire town essentially approaches Belle on Gaston's behalf so that he can basically force her into getting married to him. She kicks him to the curb. Everybody disperses, and she sings the reprise of Belle, which is when she tells us she wants adventure in the great wide somewhere. And again, it's a short version. It's about a minute and a half long. But I think it's a notable reprise, not just because it really leans into the I want aspect, but because it feels so different from the opening version of the song, even if it is utilizing similar musical qualities. Anything else the two of you would want to add about this specific mini version of that song?
I mean, I guess nothing except that I'm still amused to this day about how it just feels like Maria running through the hillsides in The Sound of Music. It's, I just wanted to see her spin around as she goes through there. But no, I mean, you say that. I really don't think it changes any. I mean, we already get the sense from the first version of the song that she wants much more for this than this provincial life. I don't know that this song adds to it. It just gives it sort of that, like, here it is. This is that big wide world. This is what I want. So it gives it kind of a visual component, like instead of this sort of cramped and claustrophobic town, this is what I want, the bigger world. So I like the visual component of it, but in terms of what the song says or tells, I think we've got it.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of agreeing with both of you in that, like, I like that it gives you a short, honed-in version because I love that the opening version, as we said, is kind of accomplishing a lot. It's like a multiple task song because it's both giving her the I want, but also like, here's the town, here's the villain, here's all this stuff that's going to be important later. But I do like, we do one more little check-in that's like, a little more hyper-focused. And it's almost like, here's the version that would have been the more part of your world version, right? If it was simply her doing that.
I think the only thing I would say is I think the initial song doesn't immediately make clear how the rest of the town will really ally itself with Gaston, whereas by the time of the reprise, it's like, okay, now I do truly get why she doesn't like the town in which she lives, because if you want to think it was just Gaston and LeFou at her door, but it's like, wow, there's a lot of you who are helping her out here. Helping him out here. That's pretty gross.
I guess I'm asking, is this any different than the one verse, addition to part of your world of the water crashing on the rocks? All right.
I think it manages. I mean, I see your point, but I think there's enough there to differentiate it. I think because part of your world, she's talking about Eric both times, whereas this time it feels a little bit more tangible why she wants to leave, why she wants that adventure.
All right.
But I also would want to point out, and I'll mention it more with Gaston as a song. This time around, I really thought Gaston is very Brom Bones-esque, if you remember the Adventures Big Bottom Mr. Toad. The difference being in Big Bottom Mr. Toad, you're kind of meant to think Brom Bones has a point to be making fun of the nerd. Not so much here. But after that song, again, that's pretty much when Philippe arrives. Belle realizes that Timmy is stuck down the old well or something along those lines because she's able to tell from Philippe something is up. She is taken by Philippe to the castle. Belle is, of course, horrified to find that her father has been thrown in this jail in the castle. She meets the Beast. She is duly horrified when she realizes he's not just a jerk. He is this physically imposing figure. And she still offers herself in conjunction for her father to let her father go. And, Maurice is horrified, but the Beast agrees to this, partially because, as we all know, if the Beast ever wants to change, he's got to fall in love and have someone fall in love with him in return. And, probably a little bit more likely to have that happen with Belle than her father. So I do just want to clarify one thing I always manage to forget is that this script has to do so much in so little time. It speaks to your point earlier, Scott. This is an 80-minute movie when you take the credits out. And it takes a while to get to the part where Belle and the Beast are actually falling for each other outside of this. The knowledge that they're going to have to fall in love, it does take a while, which I don't say is a bad thing. It's a very economical script in that way. Something just to acknowledge here. Now, I also want to call out that when Maurice is sent packing, he is put on the wagon that's like a massive overgrown spider, and that has always creeped me out so much. Talking about the cruelty of the enchantress, it's like, how do you decide which person gets turned into which horrific item? And it's not just the visual, it's the sound of the wagon moving.
Yeah. It's that little skittering insectoid kind of thing.
Again, body horror. And by the way, it's funny. I vaguely recalled that the remake has this like kinky line to end the movie. I'd forgotten there's a really weird laugh line at the end of this version of this. We'll get there eventually, but it speaks to the body horror aspects. So again, as Belle is becoming generally, she's being introduced to the castle. She is not put in jail. She is given an actual room. Maurice goes back home to the town. And of course, Maurice, being as horrified as he wants to get everybody in town to come with him. But before he can do that, we get the next big song, and that is the aforementioned Gaston. Now, we will, of course, later in this discussion talk about the various and sundry Academy Awards and other awards this film was nominated for. I guess I'd forgotten that Gaston did not get an Academy Award nomination for Best Original.
I was mad this morning looking at that.
It really is, because we talked about Poor Unfortunate Souls in our Little Mermaid episode. Aladdin doesn't have a villain song in the proper way. Yes, Jafar has a bit of a Prince Ali reprise, but it's not really the same kind of thing. This song is, I think, maybe the cleverest, funniest, wittiest song that Howard Ashman wrote for Disney. Now, if, in the same way that you can look at Part of Your World as the equivalent of Somewhere That's Green from Little Shop of Horrors, you can look at this song as the equivalent of Dentist from Little Shop of Horrors. I think this, though, is such a brilliant skewering of toxic masculinity. It's easy to look at Gaston as a character and say, what if the traditional looking prince was the villain? It's a very clever upending of expectations. And I think it really goes hand in hand with the extremely witty lyrics. And, something else that I'm certainly not as well equipped to talk about as others is the fact that you could look at this movie and the way that Howard Ashman wrote the lyrics to songs like this, and especially to another song we'll get to later, as a commentary on AIDS. The idea being that the beast feels cursed with this inexplicable and devastating thing that has happened to him that is going to literally kill him in a potential situation, and the way that people rise up against him based on the way that he looks, the way that he appears. And you think about a song like this and how it positions Gaston as this unself-aware, extremely selfish, vain, cruel character. And it does it in a way that, again, is really fun, really funny, cleverly animated. There's so many great villain performances in these movies. Every once in a while, I'll be like, man, Richard White is so great as Gaston. And this is a guy who has, I want to say, basically done nothing in terms of movies and TV aside from playing Gaston. He's been in theater before, a lot of regional shows. I don't know where or how they found him, but it is one of the great, one and done kind of performances. It's just so, it's such a wonderful tenor voice, and he had opera background as well, which does not surprise me, but just such a great fusion of singer, of song, of songwriting. Just it's not my favorite song in the film, but that's only because there's 5 different songs that compete for that title. What do the two of you think of Gaston?
Yeah, it's spectacular. Quickly, I just want to mention that my background with Menken and Ashman is that when Little Shop of Horrors, the movie, opened, I was in 6th grade, and I was so obsessed I saw it 9 times in the theater. So
Wow.
I was very on board for these guys, and it did make me pay attention when they started doing the Disney stuff. And I do think Gaston, well, first of all, it's my favorite Disney villain song for sure. But I also think, again, kind of like we were saying with Belle, what makes it extra special is it accomplishes multiple things. It is the traditional villain song on one hand, but also it's a two-hander where LeFou is kind of trying to pick him up, trying to get the bounce back in his step. And then it's also this anthem. It gives the villain kind of a theme song almost in a fun way. Yeah, I don't know. It is a really, really spectacular number. And it did make me retroactively mad at the Academy 35 years later that they didn't nominate it this morning.
Yes, okay. Everything all of you have said, amazing. It is one of the most complicated rhyme schemes I have ever seen. I mean, if you try to diagram this thing, it just, I dare you. And I still, to this day, I've said, there is no better internal rhyme in the American musical canon than as a specimen, yes, I'm intimidating. That is just how a mind comes up with that. That alone should grant immortality, the Valhalla of the songwriting. You belong there for just that line. But it is, I mean, again, it does all of those things narratively. You get that sort of little mini reprise where you get the verse that basically explains what his plot is going to be as after we've discovered that, you know, Maurice is going to be part of his plan. And I've always liked doing that because that's the part of the time right there. The fool, I'm afraid I've been thinking. And
a dangerous pastime.
I know. So, I mean, it does all of these things. It's funny. The staging of it, and again, this is something we've talked about many times over the course of this show, which is how it works as a song alone. Like, I will listen to it. It's just hilarious. It's fun to listen to by itself. But the way it is staged as a production number is amazing. All of these things work together. It's just, this is, again, the best, my favorite Disney animated, and it is the best collection of songs outside of Mary Poppins, which has so many more, so that's the only thing that makes it unfair.
That is true. And I will say, so the reprise of Gaston comes, you know, at the end of the full song. Maurice comes in, explains what he has seen. Of course, nobody in the town believes him, which, as much as we may dislike the members of the town, I can understand why. Kooky guy says he sees a horrible beast. Sure you do. That leads to the reprise, which, again, it's not maybe as special to me as the Belle reprise, but I could, off the top of my head, say the opening lines there that Scott and I just redid right now. And it's so clever, it's so funny, and it's so insidious in establishing Gaston especially and LeFou as these just incredibly horrible dudes. And of course,
and it taught so many children and adults the world expectorating.
Yes, it did. Oh, it's such a perfect song. And yes, it is, even though, as we will discuss, it's not like the Academy ignored this movie or its songs, but Gaston was left out in the cold, just like Maurice is at the end of the reprise. Once we go back.
It's funny, this movie's opening, we're talking about how this weekend Moana is opening, but another movie opening this weekend is a new Evil Dead movie. And the reason I bring that up, as someone who's a big Disney and horror fan, is I always remember when Army of Darkness opened a couple years after this, that I remember reading a review that said how Bruce Campbell has Ash in that movie. Seems like a live action version of Gaston. And I knew exactly what they meant. I mean, the funny thing with Beauty and the Beast is in the final act, obviously, Gaston will stop being a funny villain and he'll actually like turn into like, oh, like, yeah, he's trying to kill this guy. But, you know, for much of the movie, he is a funny villain. And so, yeah, I could definitely see that correlation.
Oh, for sure. Now, after the reprise is wrapped, we shift back to the castle where the Beast wants to have a formal dinner with Belle. She, of course, has no interest in that. There is a row that the two of them have. And eventually Belle sneaks out by herself because maybe she doesn't want to eat with the Beast, but she is pretty hungry. And as it turns out, everybody who works in the castle is more than happy to accommodate the young woman. And, of course, they are led by Lumiere, voiced by... I said that Angela Lansbury was incomparable, but you know what? So was Jerry Orbach, because he gets to sing. He gets to do a better job of being Maurice Chevalier than Maurice Chevalier was with the Aristocats, because Jerry Orbach gets to lead us in the next song, Be Our Guest. Now, the following year with Aladdin, I feel like Friend Like Me ends with that applause gag, and it feels like a riff on songs like Be Our Guest or Under the Sea, where you have the wacky comic relief characters leading this big, massive, unforgettably catchy song. And Be Our Guest is just it's so clever and fun in its own way. You get a little bit of Angela Lansbury as Mrs. Potts singing along, and you just even especially when you're a kid, when I'm 7 years old seeing this, you don't think at the time about how horrifying a life it must be for these people trapped in these not real bodies and not able to do the thing they were meant to do or that they feel like they were meant to do in their work. And the song is meant to be a release for all of them. Yes, I finally get to make some food. Yes, I finally get to serve you tea. Things like that. But it's fun. It's a really fun song. Like that's Beauty and the Beast is maybe not a movie that I automatically associate with the word fun, but then you think about songs like Be Our Guest and the joke at the end of it is that Cogsworth, who is the only stick in the mud for a while, finally gets into tapping his proverbial toes at the music. And how could you not? It's just such an exuberant piece of animation and music. Maybe not quite as complicated lyrically as Gaston or Belle, but still a hell of a piece of music. What do the two of you think?
Dive in.
First of all, it's funny to think about public perception of actors because this is like a year before Jerry Orbach will join Law and Order, and obviously that will be kind of like a defining role, that and Dirty Dancing, like as far as like what generationally people think of him as. And then you listen to him in this movie and what he's doing with the accent and the performance. People, either forget or never knew he was a song and dance man prior to Law and Order. But it's like, he's so fun doing this role. Also, it's funny to think that Angela Lansbury was halfway through Murder, She Wrote at this point. Mm-hmm. So, also kind of very much, ingrained in people's head a certain way. But this is a song. It's one of those things where something can be obviously oversaturated yet still great, because Be Our Guest is such a perennial, it's such a go-to. Disney will play it any chance they can get at the parks and events. As someone who's been gone to Philhar Magic many times at the parks, I'm very familiar with that portion. But at the end of the day, as much as you can be like, hey, I'm sick of this, just like you can be sick of anything good when it's too much, it's still a great number in and of itself, and has sort of an animation display. And, on one hand, you can feel like they are trying to, catch that high again from Little Mermaid. But I feel like they do it, It's like, I remember people applauding in the theater for the first time for this.
Sure.
And, that's saying something.
Yes, absolutely. And it does all the things that it sets out to do. But I think what's actually, to me, perhaps the meta fun part of this is that we see, just from the moment that, Lumiere kind of peeks his head back in and lets Cogsworth know we're going to put on a show, and the spotlight hits him, and it's like this has been like, oh my, I've been waiting for this moment. And I think that alone sort of sets it up that it's not just the production number within the movie, it's a production number for the characters, and they know it. And everything you already saying, they've been just sitting here waiting, it just sort of explodes out of them in champagne, things, and but even though it is not quite Gaston in the terms of its lyrical dexterity, it still does. There's still, again, he doesn't have to go that hard, and he, and yet we do get, we'll prepare and serve with flair. You didn't have to have the internal rhyme, but dang it, I'm going to give it to you. So these things that just keep coming up in all these songs you hesitate to throw a little too much external knowledge in there, but is this someone who's like, I'm writing my last pieces of music, and it's like, I'm giving this thing everything I have, and you can feel just like it's just epic talent pouring out all over this movie.
Yeah, and to add on to what Eric was saying, yes, I know. At the time, I don't even know if I knew who Jerry Orbach was when I was age 7, because I had not begun watching Law and Order. I waited. I was like 9 or 10 when my parents let me watch Law and Order, and that was, of course, where I forget when I first pieced together. Wait, Lenny Briscoe is Lumiere? What?
Well, I had the original cast album from Chicago, so I knew he was Billy Flynn.
Well, right. Okay. I was going to say, he was the original Billy Flynn in Chicago. He won a Tony for Promises, Promises, the musical based on The Apartment. He was in The Fantastics, which is one of the most long-running shows ever. He originated the Try to Remember. So, he was around for a long time, to be fair. And Eric, you're absolutely right to point that out. I'd forgotten to do so myself. But Be Our Guest is great. It would be amazing no matter what, but Jerry Orbach certainly adds something to it. Now, after that, there is a little bit of arguing and fighting some more between Belle and the Beast. There is this sequence in which Belle tries to sneak her way through the West Wing, which is the place that she's never supposed to go. And once they have this big row, she tries to escape, especially after she finds the enchanted rose that essentially controls his fate. Wolves, the same one from Maurice, they attack Belle. Beast comes to her rescue. They come to a bit of a détente. She nurses his wounds. She reminds him, as he's already heard a few times, that maybe he ought to control his temper. And as they slowly begin to fall in love, we get our first of two sweeter songs. This is a good song. It's probably the least of the songs in the movie, even though it has to do a lot of heavy lifting because, as I said earlier, the script has to accomplish a lot. The romance has to burgeon very quickly, and it starts with something there. A duet of sorts. We basically get to hear the internal monologues for both Belle and the Beast, where they're each realizing that maybe there is actually some romance happening here. It's a sweet and charming number. We get to hear Robbie Benson's voice a little bit more naturally than they fiddle a little bit with his voice when he's voicing the Beast to make him sound more gravelly and intense. Less so in this song. What do the two of you think of something there?
Yeah, it's the, I'd say, weakest, and it's not bad, but it's the weakest song in and of itself in the movie. It's the least memorable or sort of catchy. However, I do, again, sort of returning to the Broadway show approach of all this, it feels like you said, it's doing heavy lifting. It's moving the story along. It is a certain kind of number that gets to feature several of the characters kind of, in a little bit of a baton, passing here that are going to like move you along. Here's the part where they actually fall in love. Not quite doing the Princess Bride, but kind of like, he's getting us through so we don't have a bunch of love scenes, but we get this through montage. And I think it completely accomplishes its goal, even though, has like a song I'd listen to. It's not a standout.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got this collection of bangers, there's going to be one that's not as great as all the rest of them, and
Right.
This is it. And there's just times when something has to, as you say, serve its narrative function, and yet even within that, there's still that little playful version. You have all the characters sort of bouncing their reactions off of one another. Well, who'd have thought? Well, bless my soul. Well, who'd have known? Well, who indeed? That's the kind of thing that you expect from a stage. That's the little play you get on a stage show where the characters can work with each other. And so these are just little moments where that, again, it didn't have to go this hard, and yet it was still doing all these things well.
Yep. And I will note at this point, by the way, when I rewatched this movie on Disney Plus, I was surprised but not sad to realize that the standard version of the movie that Disney Plus has does not feature a song called Human Again, which I will at least acknowledge here, because Howard Ashman and Alan Menken wrote that as well. If you have seen one of the re-releases, you may well have seen a version of the movie with Human Again in it. Human Again is fine. I feel like that's the one where I'd be like, okay, I can see why they cut that song. It is a fun, it's a solid song in its way, but it feels a little, I guess Be Our Guest, I would say, accomplishes the same thing and does so more effectively. I don't know if either of you had anything you wanted to say about that one, but I at least wanted to clarify that if you're watching this on Disney Plus, Human Again, I have to imagine, is in one of the versions in the special features, but I will admit I did not look. It's been in different re-releases, just not one that I got to watch this time. But go ahead, Scott.
I mean, I'll just, because I have this thing about the versions of movies, and it's like, decide which your version is. Human Again is not part of Beauty and the Beast, period. End of discussion. It is not part of Beauty and the Beast. It is part of the stage version of it, fine. And I've heard it less, and it's like, yeah, this is a nice song. But again, I think what makes this movie what it is, beyond the songs that are in it, is the choices that were made to be ruthlessly narratively efficient to make everything work, and realizing that song, as nice as it might have been and as fun as it might have been, slowed things down, just shows you how everyone was thinking I'm going to kill my darlings. I'm going to kill my darlings because it
Yep.
serves the movie best.
Yep.
Yeah, I have no qualms about Human Again being in the stage version, and like, hey, we want to pad this out a little more. It's a fine song, but yeah, I don't miss it when it's not there. It's not, like you said, it's not part of the movie to me at its core. By the way, you guys have probably encountered this other times, but since it is the first time for me in a little while, I hate when all studios do it. But watching Beauty and the Beast last night and seeing the modern day Disney logo open it, followed by the Walt Disney Animation Studios logo that didn't exist in any form. Like, come on, guys. This is not what the movie is. Like, just keep your, plus it's also kind of fun when you have the classic logos. So I hate that.
Absolutely cannot stand it. That was my first note that I wrote this morning. It was like, I wish I had the original logo, because in my head, that's how the movie transitions into the mysterious, very Camille Saint-Saëns inspired Alan Menken score. He's talked about how it's very much like I think it's from Carnival of the Animals, the aquarium piece from that. If you've ever seen the previews for movies like Curious Case of Benjamin Button, you know what piece of music I'm talking about. Anyway, I agree, Eric. Now, after something there, we get to have an even more romantic number. This is a scene that cannot be improved upon. Somebody thought that they could do it better in live action and animation with the 2017 remake. They were wrong. It cannot be improved on. It is, of course, the title sequence, the song Beauty and the Beast, performed by Angela Lansbury, as I'm sure both of you know, and it maybe our listeners do or don't, a song that Angela Lansbury recorded cold on the first take after getting a plane delay. She comes into the studio. She knocks it out of the park because she is a goddamn professional. She is, I'm telling you, I like Angela. There will be no besmirching of Angela Lansbury on this show. There will be a discussion about a kind of sort of contretemps about the performance of this song at the Oscars. We'll talk about that later. But this version is perfect. This is notably a sequence that included some computer animation with the CAPS system. The camera movement there is computer aided, and can you tell 35 years later? Maybe, kind of, but who cares? This is the apotheosis of what Disney Animation was trying to do. This is the peak of the Disney Renaissance. Has it ever been better than this scene? I honestly don't know. This is just perfection. What are the two of you think?
Yeah. I mean, that is a terminology that I used when we talked about it before, which is it is perfect cinema. There is no part of this thing that does not work well integrated with each other. That Angela Lansbury performing this song, I always get choked up, not just watching it, but thinking about it and talking about it, because it is such an utterly unique kind of love song. Because it's not a love song about falling in love. It is a love song about being in love. And that is a very different thing. And a love song about staying in love and about what is required in order to. Because this is basically, in 2 verses and a bridge, managing to recognize the arc of what is necessary in order for a relationship to work. And that is freaking astonishing. That is just one of the most amazing pieces of songcraft, and that you give it to someone whose voice tells you that there is wisdom and knowledge in their life, not the version that is a single version by a couple of belters. It's just someone saying, I've been around, I know what it takes, I'm teaching you a few things. And it's perfect. It's just perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna be Chris Farley show here, and go on that. Agree with you guys. It's such a beautiful sequence, the blend of the animation and of the song was written and her performance, and really just the sweeping of it. It pulls you in. It sells all the emotion. Again, this is a animated family movie with a short runtime, and it is not going to have long love scenes. But I think that this song completely solidifies us being sold on these characters falling in love in such an important way. And to get a little ahead of ourselves, it's like the closing, you're kind of referencing here, the closing credits having the pop version, the Celine Dion, Peabo Bryson version, which I remember at the time got serious radio play. But today you almost never hear. It's like, because it's like, this has happened a lot more recently with Disney animated movies where they still do the pop version, but it's like the one that gets actually like listened to and played, and you might even hear in a grocery store, is the version from inside the movie. But with Beauty and the Beast, as time has gone on, it's like, yeah, it's easy to kind of have to be reminded that, like, oh, there's a closing credits song with Celine Dion. But because the Angela Lansbury one is just so ingrained, and I think is this sort of core memory of people of watching this movie and, really kind of knowing you were connecting with the story and the characters.
Yeah. So, agreed completely. I will talk about the cover song later. I have thoughts. So, after this song, almost immediately after, Belle and the Beast seem like they're pretty much there. The two of them, they clearly are in love with each other. We know this. They haven't said it in that many words, but you don't need to. Belle just says, she wishes she could see her father again. The Beast feels for her and says, well, fortunately, I have a magic mirror that can show me anybody at any time. What a convenient option. And he shows her Maurice, but she is, of course, horrified to see that he is ill, that he seems pretty close to death's door. The Beast frees Belle to let her rescue him, to bring him back to health. She finds Maurice, she brings him home, and they are both surprised to find Mrs. Potts' son, Chip, has stowed away. Maurice found Chip charming as well. So, hey, it's like, you're the one guy who was there who I really liked, so that's okay. And the two of them, they are... The three of them seem like maybe they can figure something out. Maurice realizes maybe the Beast is not quite as bad as he thought. And then, unfortunately, Gaston's plan comes briefly to fruition because he has brought a number of villagers with him, along with the overseer of, I don't know if I'd ever written it in my notes before, with the character Monsieur Dark, who is, as Wikipedia tells me, the sadistic warden of the Asylum de Loons. I'd forgotten that. I looked at the wagon this time and I laughed at that. Voiced by Tony J, who we will talk about one day when we discuss the songs of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He doesn't sing here. Of course, Belle is horrified to see what Gaston is doing. Gaston says, well, if you marry me, maybe I won't have your father committed. She reveals that as crazy as Maurice sounds, actually, there is a beast, and she has the mirror so she can show everybody. They are horrified, and they throw Belle and Maurice and Chip into his basement. They lock the door. They go off, and they plan to destroy the beast and the denizens of the castle, and they sing the mob song, which is the last original song in this movie before the final action sequence. And this is, it is a much more evil version of Gaston, even though the version we hear in Gaston isn't exactly a nice guy. The one line that always stands out to me, partially because of its inspiration and partially because it inspired a line in Hamilton, is "Screw your courage to the sticking place," which is a line Gaston tells to the much more terrified but much more easily swayed members of the village who come with him with their torches and their pitchforks and everything else. Any thoughts on the mob song? It's a solid piece of villainy. Again, after Beauty and the Beast, the song, it's hard to top that, but it's a good song to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you kind of made reference to this idea of what the allegories might be that might have been playing around in Ashman's mind, and whether it's specifically for the response to AIDS or just to maybe queer people in general, but you have that sort of that idea of how easy it is to get people to be scared of something, and that's the line. It's we don't like what we don't understand. In fact, it scares us, and that's and the fact that we have the grab your sword, grab your bow, praise the Lord, and here we go. That didn't have to be there. That didn't have to be there specifically. That they were claiming God on their side as they were doing it, but it's there. So I think it's really, I mean, it is not an inconsequential song. I think it is really kind of something that was placed there as a bit of there's some anger in this thing, and I dig it.
Yeah, again, it's probably the other song that in and of itself is not like a song you would like listen to, and yet story wise and word structure wise, it makes perfect sense. It works as sort of the frightening sequence it's supposed to. Like I said, it takes Gaston from a comedic villain into something much darker. And also, yeah, like you guys were saying, both with the themes of the movie about, how the beast is perceived, and also Gaston, it's playing into some fun tropes in that it's a classic Frankenstein. They're going to go into the castle, the angry mob with the torches, and like Frankenstein's monster, the beast is, misunderstood ultimately. He is a, character to be sympathized with. Even more so, here they're going to fully, 100% redeem him. Although Frankenstein's monster often is as well. And so, yeah, I think it's not like, an amazing song to like sing along to, but as far as the sequence and what it's doing, and like you said, lyric even, I think it's a really good storytelling device.
And I also wanted just to add real quickly the thing that there's this, the sort of wisdom of crowds, wisdom of mobs things. I also love and 50 Frenchmen can't be wrong. That this is how they're convinced that they're doing the right thing, because 50 Frenchmen, that we're all in agreement that we should do this, and that means that we must be right. And again, there is no lyrical taking a vacation in this entire movie. It's just every bit of it is just chef kiss.
Yes, agreed. So after that, as mentioned, there's a big action sequence at this point. The beast has essentially resigned himself to death, but everybody else sees the Gaston and the villagers coming. They mount this very comic action sequence. There's a lot of goofiness. There is, speaking of representation, there is the one bit that I don't even think aged very well back in the 90s, where the one guy is like grabbed by the wardrobe, comes out with might seem traditional female garb and freaks out. But there's a big action sequence that eventually leads to Gaston going to the top of the castle where Beast is mournful and brooding. They have this big fight that's very intense. And I just want to call out, it's not a musical moment, but well, it is from a composition standpoint. I have always been so struck, and we talk about great animation, great facial character animation. The moment where the Beast has Gaston by the scruff of his shirt, he is ready to drop him to his death, and the music softens. We get that very Carnival of the Animals style music that plays, and the Beast's face kind of changes in that, which is such a brilliant piece of facial animation as he realizes that he is not going to give in to his baser instincts. Gaston, of course, will, which is what causes him to get knocked off the castle for his troubles. Of course, there is a moment where you think, oh my goodness, the Beast is dead. Belle says that she loves him just before the final petal of the rose falls. He transforms back into a human. She recognizes his eyes from the torn up portrait in the West Wing. They fall in love. We get the very last line, which is after everybody's turned back into a human. Chip, as a boy, looks at Mrs. Potts and says, do I have to sleep in the cupboard again? Which is such a weird way to end the movie, but also very fitting. And again, I feel like, doesn't the remake basically do a joke where she's like, maybe you should grow a beard or something like that? And it's like, okay, I think I know what you're implying there, Emma Watson. So
also,
we then
I'm sorry, I just want to say that it made me think that Chip has all those sisters and brothers in the cupboard, and again, Enchantress, evil, all those poor kids. But also, we don't see any other kids at the end of the movie.
Well, and also, if it's been 10 years, does that mean that Chip, to a question earlier, was frozen in time at 10, or was he a baby? Like, how does that? Questions that we don't need to answer. Anyway, so there is the cover version of the song performed by Celine Dion and Peabo Bryson that plays at the end credits. It's fine. The reason why I want to bring it up is in conjunction with the Oscars. Before we talk about any covers, I do want to talk about the awards first. So this is a great way to start a comment. I don't want to speak ill of the dead. However, I was reminded that when the remake was released in 2017, among the many different pieces of literature written about the movie, there was an oral history of the song of Beauty and the Beast from CBC Music that pretty much was just two interviews with Angela Lansbury, who passed away in, I want to say 2020. Didn't she
22?
Okay. I recalled when I was reading this, I was like, I know she had that brief cameo in Glass Onion. Spoiler alert for Glass Onion. But she passed away a few years after. Peabo Bryson passed away earlier this year, coincidentally, but the person from CBC spoke to both of them. And as it turned out, there was a bit of a contretemps regarding who was going to perform the song at the Oscars, because there are two different versions. And Eric, as you acknowledged, the pop music version played a ton at the time. It was unavoidable. On the Oscars. Now, this is directly from the CBC. I am going to quote this in full. Please indulge me. This is Peabo Bryson. What I did not get was when there was a lot of opposition to us doing the Oscars. Celine and I doing the Oscars. Behind the scenes stuff that you didn't know. We didn't know until a week, 10 days before the Oscars, if it was going to happen or not. In brackets, Angela Lansbury, close brackets, wanted to sing the song herself. You're a teapot. I'm sorry. Let's be honest. She's a teapot. What's she going to wear?
What?
A teapot outfit. Oh, hang on. A teapot outfit on the stage at the Oscars. In the animation itself, within the structure, it works perfectly. It's okay. You can take liberties vocally in theater. She took liberties in Sweeney Todd. So, hey, great. I'm not mad at you for that. But this is totally different. This is not Sweeney Todd. With her as a teapot, I think it is really appropriate. But there's a difference between singing a song as a teapot, Sweeney Todd, and singing a song at the Oscars that was recorded by two honest-to-goodness great vocalists. And there's a difference between those three things. I mean, there's a lot of difference. So to appease her, they let her come out and sing a verse. And then we came out and sang the real version. As I said, I do not wish to speak ill of the dead. However, Peabo Bryson may be surprised to learn that the real version is in the movie. It is the version that Angela fucking Lansbury sang. Yes, she was in Sweeney Todd as Mrs. Lovett. Yes, she was made. I hear that and I think, I remember seeing that at the time and being really bothered, especially since now here, I don't usually get to pull this card. I have done an oral history, and I'll tell you one of the great joys of putting together an oral history is when you get to put quotes in opposition to each other, next to each other, essentially, as like a response. So you have the Peabo Bryson thing, and immediately thereafter, Lansbury, quote, "No, I don't," open brackets, remember discussions regarding who would sing at the Oscars, to be quite truthful, close brackets. I don't remember there being any altercation on the subject of who would be singing it. They may have been more aware of it than I was. I just went along for the ride. I bet she did. I bet Angela Lansbury went along for the ride because she was a legend. And I'm not saying that Peabo Bryson is bad in his version. It's fine. I think that the version of Beauty and the Beast is honestly a little better than the pop music version of A Whole New World at the end of Aladdin, sung by Regina Bell and Peabo Bryson. And as we've already acknowledged, this song introduced Celine Dion to many Americans. She was obviously not a nobody before this, but this song vaulted her into worldwide fame. So it is obviously very critical to her legacy. You might even call it Titanic to her legacy. That's a Broadway reference.
I'm nerd.
Very good. But my point is, I hear that and I just think, I get that song's critical to your legacy because I know Peabo Bryson had a career before this. This certainly helped it out. But like, dude, the real version is the version that she sang. And it is worth noting, I want to shift into the awards discussion. We're talking about any covers. This movie received 6 Academy Awards at the Oscars in early 1992. It is famously the first animated film to receive a Best Picture nomination. It is the only animated film to receive one when the field only had 5 nominees. Up and Toy Story 3 received nominations in 2009 and 2010, but those were years where there were 10 nominees. Now, I am sure you both recall that the winner that year was The Silence of the Lambs. As many things I have said about Beauty and the Beast today, I get why The Silence of the Lambs won. It is an excellent film, perhaps not the most positive representation of trans culture, but Ted Levine has spoken about that, and I give him credit for being forthright about how that movie may have been a little flawed, but it's still an excellent thriller in its own right. My hot take is that Beauty and the Beast was the second best nominee in the category that year. Do either of you recall the other 3 nominees for Best Picture?
I'm going to guess JFK is one of them.
You are correct.
And of course, as you know, because I'm prepared for this,
I know.
The ones I did know ahead of time, and I did not remember. I knew JFK, and I knew Bugsy.
So you had forgotten that it's funny. I've seen this movie once, but I think of the episode of The Simpsons that parodied this film when it had Anne Bancroft and Marge Simpson saying Lowenstein, Lowenstein.
Yes.
The movie is The Prince of Tides. That's the other nominee that year. Okay. Beauty and the Beast is the second best of those. I know some people very highly hold JFK in esteem, and it's a very excellently edited film, which is why it won Best Editing that year. But
it's got the most editing.
It sure does. And so, Scott, you already know, we all know that Beauty and the Beast won for original score. The other nominees that year were Bugsy, JFK, The Prince of Tides, and The Fisher King. A very good movie. I can't tell you I recall the score to The Fisher King at all.
It was big. It was a big score.
I'm sure it was. Now, as noted, the best original song, the winner, Beauty and the Beast. The other two nominations from Beauty and the Beast, because it got 3, were Be Our Guest and Belle. The other two song nominees, one of them was from, it's funny, Eric, you mentioned a film that I know both Scott and I love very much, The Rocketeer, earlier. I hold this movie in very low esteem because it was so popular in the summer of 91 that it trounced The Rocketeer at the box office. The film is Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. The song is Everything I Do, I Do It For You by Bryan Adams. Talk about a song that had a ton of playtime on the radio in 91.
Inescapable.
Oh, yes. Now,
that's funny.
Do either of you know, Scott, you might have looked it up, what the other original song nominee was? Scott, if you looked it up, don't answer. I want to see if Eric knows.
Sure. And I didn't know it. I didn't know it from memory, but this is, okay. I did not.
I don't want to keep you waiting too long because I'm trying to think. I'm like, Streisand didn't do a song for Prince of Tides that I recall.
Correct.
And so, all right, I have to give up on this one. It's going to be something I think very wild.
Well, I don't know about wild. I would say John Williams got the nomination for JFK for score, but he got the nomination for a different song from a different movie. The movie was Hook, and the song was When You're Alone. Which is definitely a song from a movie. And then I also want to call out that Beauty and the Beast was nominated for Best Sound. It did not win. Now, Scott, I'm sure you looked up what won, so I'm not going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
The other nominees were The Silence of the Lambs, JFK, and Backdraft. Eric, what do you think won for Best Sound?
I'm just going to say Backdraft because of the crackles.
Oh, no. That was nominated. It did not win.
God. So there's 5th. Oh, man. Okay. Is it something we've mentioned so far?
It is not. Here's the other hint I'll give you. There were 2 big summer movies in 91 that helped destroy The Rocketeer at the box office. One was Robin Hood. The other movie won for Best Sound. And the other movie is a pretty great action movie.
And also, here's the other hint. It also won for visual effects that same year.
Ah, yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. 91, we're a year before Batman Returns. We're forgetting something that's really going to be obvious. It's not a Jurassic. It's 2 years before Jurassic. Man. I'm blanking.
You are going to feel so silly when I tell you the winner was Terminator 2: Judgment Day.
Of course it was Terminator 2, a movie I literally just saw in the theater like 2 weeks ago.
Talking about 35th anniversary again. That movie, like Robin Hood, sucks, but Terminator 2 is incomparable. Next to Aliens, like Cameron in sequels, he was good at those. But anyway, so those are the 6 nominations it got at the Oscars. It is worth noting that at the Golden Globes, Beauty and the Beast became the first animated film to win musical or comedy. The other nominees were City Slickers, The Commitments, The Fisher King, and Fried Green Tomatoes. And Beauty and the Beast won for Best Original Song and Score at the Golden Globes as well. I do want to acknowledge that Beauty and the Beast, the song, talk about how inescapable it was. Well, it was nominated for quite a few songs, the pop version specifically, at the Grammys, at the 35th Annual Grammys in February of 1993. I do want to, so it was nominated for Song of the Year. Actually, the same artist won for Record of the Year, Album of the Year, Song of the Year. Beauty and the Beast for Song of the Year was nominated against Achy Breaky Heart. These are the ones that did not win. Achy Breaky Heart, Constant Craving by Katie Lang, Save the Best for Last by Vanessa Williams, another song that was inescapable. And then this song. Do either of you, Scott, did you look this up as well? Did you know I was going to go to Grammys? Okay. Do either of you have a guess? My only hint, this song did feature in another movie, but a movie that not many people talk about these days.
Ooh, I'm fascinated by that fact about it. Man.
It is Here, my other hint is this song has an extremely tragic backstory.
Is it Eric Clapton?
It is Eric Clapton. It is Eric Clapton, Tears in Heaven.
From the movie Rush. Rush?
Yes, the movie Rush. And so Album of the Year was Unplugged, the Eric Clapton album. So I want to note, though, for Record of the Year, I love how the Grammys separate record, album, and Song of the Year. They all sound similar, but they're not quite. So Record of the Year and Song of the Year were the exact same nominees and winner. Tears in Heaven wins, Achy Breaky Heart, Constant Craving, Save the Best for Last. Album of the Year, the winner is Unplugged. The other nominees are Beauty and the Beast, the soundtrack album itself, Annie Lennox's Diva, Katie Lang's Ingenue, and by the band U2, I believe it is pronounced Achtung, baby. Achtung, baby. If you don't know what that reference to, just Google You Talking U2 to Me, Achtung, baby. You will be greeted with the most annoying or hilarious bits between Adam Scott and Scott Aukerman that you've ever heard. The movie, and I should note, Beauty and the Beast, the song, like that, it was so big at the Grammys, especially. The pop version won for Best Pop Performance by a duo or group with vocals. It won for instrumental performance. The soundtrack won for Best Album for Children. Best Song Written Specifically for a Motion Picture or for Television. It was massive in so many ways. And Eric, you mentioned something that I had wanted to note if nobody else did. We think of The Lion King being a Broadway sensation, which it was. But it came after Beauty and the Beast was the first real Broadway adaptation Disney had made, featuring, let's not forget, not just Susan Egan originating the role of Belle before she would voice Meg in Hercules. I think of it because if anybody was to ask me, what's your favorite Broadway song? I would say Stars from Les Miserables, performed by Terrence Mann, who would go on to play the Beast in the Broadway version. Gary Beach, the late Gary Beach, who was in The Producers and won a Tony for that, played Lumiere. Burke Moses played Gaston, and straight out of Happy Days, Tom Bosley played Maurice.
And that's what I saw do it when they came to LA. And by the way, right now, as we're recording this, LA is filled with banners for Beauty and the Beast coming here soon to the Pantages.
Oh, very exciting.
Tour. Yes.
And go ahead, Scott.
And Susan Egan has wonderful anecdotes about being in Beauty and the Beast. Right? So.
I had a feeling you were going to mention, because you've had the chance to talk to her. I'm so envious. And
yes.
So and speaking of concert versions, there's a version of this at the Hollywood Bowl with Zooey Deschanel as Belle, with Taye Diggs as Gaston, Rebel Wilson as LeFou, Kelsey Grammer as Lumiere, which must have been interesting. There was a live action concert version on ABC with Josh Groban as the Beast, Joshua Henry as Gaston, Rita Moreno played the narrator. It is a movie that has such a massive legacy. And of course, there is also regretfully the remake, including, I think I mentioned at the start, way too many talented people are involved in that movie. I believe I spoke very positively in a previous episode about the film version of Dreamgirls, which I love. Bill Condon directed this movie. He knew his way around Broadway musicals. He did not know his way around this. The movie featured Dan Stevens as the Beast. Dan Stevens, who is an actor who looks like a leading man who would rather be a character actor, which means the Beast is not a great role for him. I would say Luke Evans played Gaston. Josh Gad got to have an exclusively gay moment as LeFou. I'm sure if you don't know what that's in reference to, you can Google it and see how cool it was to hear that phrase.
The weirdest terminology I've ever heard.
Oh, God. Kevin Kline played Maurice. Emma Thompson was Mrs. Potts. Ewan McGregor was Lumiere. Ian McKellen was Cogsworth. So many talented people in such a terrible movie. Because nobody can make that movie good, because it's already perfect. And I mention that because, Scott, are there any covers you'd want to call out? Since this has been, I'm sure, covered to death in the last 35 years.
I don't want to dig. I mean, you're right. Because of the cultural footprint, there are so many. But I think what's actually amusing to me is I've mentioned before secondhandsongs.com, which is a great resource for finding out about covers of songs. And so Beauty and the Beast is the fourth most covered song released in 1991, with 249 recorded cover versions.
Wow.
The only songs that have been recorded more times were covers of Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Okay, sure.
I Can't Make You Love Me by Bonnie Raitt, and the now Christmas classic, Mary Did You Know?
Okay.
However, Everything I Do It For You is also in the top 10, so that's interesting.
I was going to say, when I was just looking through the list of songs that got Grammy nominations for that year, it's like, there were some pretty big popular songs at that time that all got pretty heavily, and yes, Nirvana is a good example of that. Yeah, I mean, I don't think, the other thing I would say about this movie, I've certainly mentioned it to Scott off the air, my older son, my 11-year-old, the one who wouldn't say much better to the Enchantress. He has the acting bug. He loves to perform on stage. He just recently was part of a youth theater version in Phoenix of the musical Shrek, which on the one hand, I felt so immensely proud of my son performing on stage. And at the same time, I was reminded of how much I hate Shrek, which is a movie that is undeniably very popular. Can't wait for Shrek 5. But also a movie that tries very hard to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to make fun of fairy tales, but it also wants to be like a fairy tale at the end. And certainly the story of Fiona, who has the ogre curse on her at night, but eventually becomes an ogre for good, feels like a commentary on movies like Beauty and the Beast. Not just this one, but a few of them. And I was just thinking as I rewatched this too, yeah, there's a couple of modern references here and there. Yes, there's a couple of bits, but this movie manages to be timeless from the word go, and it absolutely extends the songs. You know, this movie, if you watch all the way to the end credits, it has the acknowledgement of Howard Ashman. It talks about that he gave a mermaid her voice, and it's such a sweet and emotional reminder of how, like, I don't know if I've said it on this podcast. I certainly said it on the old one. Next to Walt Disney, the most important figure in Disney animation is Howard Ashman, because it is easy now to forget 35 years later, not between the three of us, but maybe some of our listeners may not realize it. If you're younger, this movie came out only a few years after there was a thought that Disney was going to be sold, stripped for parts, that its animation studio was going to go away. This movie, as I mentioned at the start, proved that Little Mermaid was not a fluke, that this was a real thing that they could double down on. It led to the rest of the Disney Renaissance. It is such a crucial film, and yes, there are so many people who made this movie special, but I'm telling you, Howard Ashman is the one who you never will know. We will never know, and it's so heartbreaking to never know what else he could have done. If he had had more time, if AIDS had not been the devastating disease that it was, that it ravaged so many talented people. And again, if I'm emotional, it's because I'm telling you, Howard Ashman he's on the top. He's the top of, he's the apex of American songwriting for so many people who grew up when I did. It's just, and this movie is, I put it in my notes this time. This is his finest hour, and it isn't even the movie he wanted to make next, which says so much about his talent. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, just when you look at how few movies he worked on, and yet how much he is just completely part of like our pop culture tapestry. I was going to make a joke earlier. I'll still make the joke, but also it just kind of speaks to, which is I was going to make a joke about how Be Our Guest, about the fact that it's like, and it gave us the gray stuff as an actual food you could buy at Disneyland, which is true. But again, it's like Howard Ashman writes a little one-off line there, and like 10 million other things he wrote in these songs, we know exactly what they're referencing and what it is, and it is really amazing. I'll tell you guys a quick little personal story, which is just I did the junket for the Little Mermaid live action. And I did interview Menken at that, and who was at his piano for interviews, and that was a cool thing. And
Oh, yeah.
as I was getting up, I was finishing up. I just have to tell you, when Little Shop of Horrors came out, I was obsessed. I saw it 9 times, blah, blah, blah. And he started to play some Little Shop on the piano as I was exiting. And that was really freaking cool.
Oh, yes. Listen, before I let Scott give his final word, I will save my personal Alan Menken played for me story when we talk about the Hunchback of Notre Dame, because he did, and if anybody could see my face when I was talking to him on the phone there, I nearly fell out of my chair when I heard him play music from that film. It's incredible. Scott, go ahead. Anything else you want to share?
I think we've all gushed enough, and I think what you're saying about the legacy of Howard Ashman, I do not think it is a stretch to suggest that the monolith that Disney is now, owning Marvel, none of that is possible if the animated films of the late 80s and 90s don't hit the way they do. And they have the chance to hit the way they did because of Menken and Ashman. That's just it. No one can convince me otherwise. Disney of the 21st century, for better or worse, you can say it's for worse, but for better or worse, it does not exist in this form as this media monolith without those movies becoming super hits, and they don't become super hits without them.
I agree. I think that's it then for Beauty and the Beast. So Scott, why don't you take us out?
So with that, it's time to turn down the volume on Mousterpiece Melodies. What's on the playlist for our next episode? From 2017, Coco. Eric Goldman, thank you so much for joining us. I know we gave some of your credits at the top of the show, but as a reminder, can you please let listeners know where they can find you online?
Thank you so much. It's been so great being here. And you can find me at the Eric Goldman is my handle on most of your social channels, your Instagrams, your Blue Skies, The Bad Place. That's where my name is there. And then on YouTube, Eric Goldman's Cultured Pop, but I even think there I'm at the Eric Goldman as well. And then the We Enjoy podcast I do with Matt Fowler. You can listen to us blabbing about different movies. We're just starting a 1986 run right now.
Ooh, that 40 years ago, yeah. I'm sure you'll be talking about Aliens soon, talking about Cameron and sequels. Aliens is the one.
Well, we already did the Alien franchise, so we had to search some other places.
Fair enough. Well, anyway, we'd love for all of you out there to listen along. Tell us what you think. Do you love the songs of Beauty and the Beast? That is your only option. I'm not going to ask you if you have another opinion about them, because how on earth could you? If you have any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share, you can always reach me at masterpiececinema@gmail.com. Follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece. Again, you can see which of the many wonderful songs from this film are going to make it far in the Ultimate Walt Disney Animation Studios songs bracket. Every day I'm posting a new poll. Scott, where can our listeners find you online?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw and on Letterboxd at Scott Renshaw. You can find my primary review outlet, Salt Lake City Weekly, is cityweekly.net. I'm Scott Renshaw.
And I'm Josh Spiegel, and we'll see you all next time on Mousterpiece Melodies.